They say the truth will set you free. But what happens when the truth has been buried for so long, twisted into something unrecognizable, that even your own child believes a lie? I heard my daughter call me an absent mother, not whispered in anger during a private argument, but proclaimed to the world in the glossy pages of her best-selling memoir. And those words, those two simple, devastating words, plunged me into a darkness, a grief so profound I never thought possible. It felt like my whole life, everything I had sacrificed, everything I had endured, had been erased, rewritten into a narrative where I was the villain. But there is another story, a truth behind her words, a truth sealed away in stacks of unread letters and buried under decades of hardship. A story she does not know, and one that, for her sake, as much as mine, needs to be told. My name is Catherine. I am 66 years old now, living alone in a small, 2-bedroom apartment that overlooks a park I rarely visit these days. It is quiet here. Too quiet, mostly. The silence amplifies the memories, both cherished and painful, that swirl around me like dust motes in the afternoon sun. Pictures line the mantelpiece, blurry school photos of 2 gap-toothed children. A faded wedding picture of a young woman full of naive hope, standing beside a man who would later shatter her world. A more recent snapshot of my daughter, Megan, smiling brightly at a book signing event. That last one, it used to fill me with such pride. Now, it feels like a constant, painful reminder of the gulf between us, the misunderstanding that defines our relationship. Megan, my daughter. She is a writer now, a successful one. Her memoir struck a chord, apparently, resonated with countless readers who saw their own family struggles reflected in her eloquent prose. I should be bursting with pride. And I was, initially. When I first saw her book, her beautiful face smiling out from the cover in the window of a local bookstore, my heart swelled. My Megan telling her story. I bought it immediately, brewed a cup of chamomile tea, and settled into my worn armchair, eager to read her words, her perspective on our life. But the pride quickly turned to disbelief, then to a cold, sickening shock. Page after page painted a picture of a childhood marked by emotional neglect, overseen by a mother who was physically present but emotionally distant, preoccupied, unavailable, an absent mother. Me. She wrote about feeling adrift, about craving connection, about a mother too consumed by her own life to truly see her children. Reading those words felt like being struck physically, knocking the wind out of me. Absent? Was that how she remembered it? Absent wasn't the word I would have chosen. Exhausted? Yes. Overwhelmed? Certainly. Fighting tooth and nail to simply survive? Absolutely. Her father, Thomas, walked out when Megan was 8, and her brother, Michael, was 10. He didn't just leave me. He left us destitute, disappearing overnight with our savings, leaving behind a pile of debts and 3 mouths to feed. There was no alimony, no child support, just absence. His absence. So, I did what I had to do. I worked. Lord, how I worked. 3 jobs, sometimes overlapping. Cleaning offices late into the night, the smell of disinfectant clinging to my clothes. Waitressing double shifts on weekends, my feet aching, forcing smiles for customers while my heart worried about the kids home alone. Picking up sewing alterations, my fingers raw, working under a dim lamp after the children were asleep. Absent? I wasn't absent by choice. Every single moment I wasn't physically with them, I was working for them. To keep a roof over their heads, food on the table, shoes on their feet. Was it ideal? Of course not. Did I miss school plays because I couldn't get off work? Yes. Did I sometimes fall asleep reading them bedtime stories because I was utterly drained? Yes. Did I wish, with every fiber of my being, that I could just be there, present and relaxed, like other mothers seem to be, more than anything. But that wasn't the hand life dealt us, and Thomas. He didn't just disappear financially. He actively worked to poison the well. After he resurfaced in another state with a new life, he fought me tooth and nail over visitation, feeding the children lies I couldn't easily counter. He controlled access, canceled visits last minute, refused to put them on the phone when I called, painting me as unstable, unreliable. The few precious hours I managed to secure with them felt strained, shadowed by his influence. And the letters. Oh, the letters. Knowing how hard it was to connect, I wrote constantly, pouring my heart out onto cheap notebook paper late at night, telling Megan and Michael about my day, asking about theirs, reminding them how much I loved them, how proud I was of them, how desperately I missed them during my long hours. I filled pages with encouragement, with stories, with promises of things we'd do when things got better. I sealed them with prayers, addressed them carefully, and sent them off, imagining my children reading them, feeling my love reach across the miles and the exhaustion. Hundreds of letters over the years. Letters Megan apparently never received, or perhaps never believed. So, reading her book, seeing myself portrayed as this cold, distant figure, it broke something inside me. It wasn't just the public accusation, the shame of neighbors and old friends reading this distorted version of our life. It was the profound, aching realization that my own daughter truly believed it, that she had carried this image of me, this pain of perceived abandonment for decades. How could she not know the truth? How could she not remember the struggle, the sacrifices? Why would she think I was absent when every breath I took was for her and her brother? Was my exhaustion so complete that it eclipsed my love and her memory? And those letters, all those letters filled with my love, my hopes, my desperate attempts to stay connected. Where did they go? What really happened to them? The shockwaves from reading Megan's memoir did not just subside. They settled into a deep, aching bruise on my soul. But beneath the hurt, something else began to stir. Not anger, not yet, but a quiet, insistent need for clarity, for validation, not necessarily from the world, but from myself. Was my memory failing me? Had the sheer exhaustion of those years blurred the edges of my love, making it invisible even to my own children? I could not accept the portrait Megan painted, the cold, distant, absent mother, because it felt fundamentally untrue to the bone-weary, fiercely loving woman I knew myself to have been. Driven by this need, I started searching. Not just through the unreliable corridors of memory, but through the tangible remnants of the past stored away in dusty boxes in the back of my closet. If I was going to challenge the narrative Megan had built, I needed more than just my own convictions. I needed proof, and the only proof I could think of were the letters. Hundreds of them, written over years, sent off into what I now realized was a void. Pulling down those heavy cardboard boxes, labeled simply kids' stuff or old papers, felt like excavating a buried part of myself. The scent of aging paper and faded ink filled the small apartment. Inside, amidst stacks of school reports, crayon drawings, and dried corsages from proms I had not been able to attend, were my own records. Old checkbook registers showing meager balances, pay stubs from the cleaning service and the diner, worn address books, and tucked away in a large manila envelope, brittle and yellowed with age, were carbon copies. Not of all the letters, heavens no. Carbon paper was an expense I could not always justify. But I had saved some, especially during particularly difficult periods, perhaps as a subconscious need to document my efforts, my love, even if only for myself. Finding them felt like discovering lost treasures, albeit painful ones. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the thin, onion skin sheets. The faint blue text, created by the pressure of my pen through the carbon paper onto a second sheet, was a ghostly echo of the originals I had sent. Reading them now, decades later, transported me back to those grueling years with a visceral force. I saw myself, younger, exhausted, sitting at the small Formica kitchen table long after the children were asleep. The only quiet time I had. The apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the scratching of my pen. I wrote about Michael's science project, asking Megan if she had helped him, reminding her to be patient with her brother. I described a funny incident with a customer at the diner, trying to bring a little lightness into their lives, even from afar. I recounted the long hours, not to complain, but to explain why I could not be there for a parent-teacher night, assuring them my absence was not lack of caring. "Mommy has to work so we can keep our little home, my darlings," one letter read, the blue script slightly shaky, probably from fatigue. "But I am thinking of you every minute. Be good for each other. I love you more than all the stars." Reading these words, my own words, brought tears to my eyes. The love was there, palpable on the page. The effort, the longing, the constant attempt to bridge the distance imposed by work and, more painfully, by their father. Because intertwined with the memories of writing were the sharp, bitter recollections of Thomas's interference. He held the power then. He had moved away, established himself, and the courts, favoring stability, had given him primary custody despite his abandonment. My access was limited, controlled, and often weaponized. I remembered phone calls abruptly cut off, visits canceled with flimsy excuses. "The kids have other plans," or "Megan is not feeling well," delivered in his smug, dismissive tone. I recalled driving hours for a scheduled weekend visit, my heart full of anticipation, only to be met with an empty house. Or worse, Thomas standing there telling me the children did not want to see me. Lies. Cruel, calculated lies designed to hurt me, to alienate my children. "They are better off without your drama, Catherine," he had sneered more than once. "They need stability, something you clearly cannot provide, working 3 jobs like some kind of vagrant." His words were designed to shame me, to reinforce the idea that my struggle was a sign of failure, not resilience. And perhaps, insidiously, they had worked, not just on me, but on the children too. The carbon copies were just the beginning. Digging deeper into another box, wedged between old utility bills and expired warranties, I found them. Bank statements and canceled checks from those years. Faded slips of paper documenting the small, regular amounts I had managed to send Thomas, earmarked specifically for the children's needs. School supplies, clothes, music lessons Megan had desperately wanted. It was never much. I barely scraped by myself. But every spare dollar I could possibly wring from my meager earnings went to them, sent with hope, often accompanied by a letter explaining what the money was for, urging him to use it solely for the children. Seeing the physical proof of those transfers, the careful notations in the memo lines, Megan's flute rental, Michael's soccer cleats, brought a fresh wave of bittersweet validation. I had provided, in every way I possibly could. Yet, according to Megan's memoir, they had often gone without. She wrote touchingly about feeling embarrassed by worn-out shoes, about missing field trips because the permission slip fee was too much. How could that be if I was sending money? The discrepancy gnawed at me. Had Thomas simply kept it, used it for himself? The thought made me sick. adding another layer of betrayal to his already lengthy list of transgressions. The memories of his specific manipulations resurfaced with painful clarity. I remembered one particular Christmas, saving for months to buy Megan the doll she had circled in a catalog. I could not afford to ship it with tracking, just regular post, sent weeks in advance with a heartfelt letter tucked inside. When I finally got the children on the phone for a brief stilted Christmas call, Thomas timing me with a stopwatch practically, Megan sounded subdued. When I asked about the doll, there was confusion in her voice. "What doll, Mommy?" Thomas cut in smoothly. "Oh, that package must have gotten lost in the mail, Catherine." Shame. Lost in the mail. Even then, a knot of suspicion had tightened in my gut. How many other packages got lost? How many letters never arrived? How often had he intercepted my attempts to connect, discarding them like junk mail, erasing my presence from their lives piece by piece? He was not just preventing physical access. He was curating their reality, crafting a narrative where I was unreliable, uncaring, absent. He fed them excuses for my missed visits. "Your mother is too busy." She must have forgotten. She probably has better things to do now. Poisonous little seeds of doubt planted in the fertile ground of their childhood disappointment. And I, exhausted, hundreds of miles away, working grueling hours, had no effective way to counter his narrative, except through letters he likely destroyed and phone calls he often blocked. The sheer injustice of it, the calculated cruelty, filled me with a cold fury I had not allowed myself to feel in years. Reading through more of the carbon-copied letters that evening, my heart ached with the love and longing poured onto those thin pages. "Megan, my sweet girl, I saw a field of daisies today and thought of you. Remember how we used to make daisy chains in Grandma's garden? Keep shining bright. Love, Mommy." Another. "Michael, be strong at your game tomorrow. Imagine me cheering louder than anyone. I am so proud of the young man you are becoming. Love, Mom." These were not the words of an absent mother. These were the desperate, loving messages of a mother kept away, fighting against silence and distance with the only tools she had. The pain was immense, reliving that helplessness, that orchestrated alienation. But beneath the pain, a steely resolve began to form. Megan was not just mistaken. She had been deceived. Thomas had not just abandoned us. He had actively worked to erase me from my children's lives, using my struggle against me. And I could not let that stand. Not anymore. Not when my daughter was building her public identity, her career, on a foundation of lies unknowingly inherited from her father. It is an incredibly lonely and painful experience, is it not? To feel like your truth has been stolen, your sacrifices ignored, your love completely misunderstood by the very people you did it all for. If you have ever felt silenced or misrepresented within your own family, struggling to make your side of the story heard, I truly understand how isolating that can be. Please, feel free to share a piece of your experience in the comments below. Sometimes just knowing you are not alone is a powerful thing. And if my story touches you, please click that like button and subscribe. Following this journey with me means more than words can say. As I sat there, surrounded by the ghosts of the past captured on faded paper, the path forward still was not entirely clear, but the need to act was undeniable. Megan deserved to know the truth. Not a bitter, accusatory truth designed to wound her, but the full, complex, painful truth of my love and sacrifice and her father's deception. But how? Simply confronting her felt wrong, potentially damaging the fragile possibility of reconciliation. And what about all those original letters, the ones I did not have copies of? Where were they? Did Thomas still have them? The thought sent a chill down my spine. What exactly had he done with years of my heartfelt correspondence to our children? Was finding them the key? The carbon copies and canceled checks were pieces of the puzzle, fragments of my truth, but they felt incomplete. They showed my efforts, my love, my financial contributions, yet they did not fully explain the vast chasm between my reality and Megan's published memories. The central mystery remained. What happened to the hundreds of original letters, the tangible proof of my constant presence in their lives, however distant? And how could Megan write about such scarcity when I had sent money, specifically designated for her and Michael? The suspicion that Thomas had not just passively allowed these things to disappear, but actively intervened, grew stronger, settling into a cold certainty in my gut. But how could I prove it? Thomas was long gone from my life, a ghost figure living somewhere across the country. Confronting him seemed impossible, likely fruitless, and potentially explosive. I needed something more concrete, something undeniable that originated from his side of the equation. I spent days racking my brain, sorting through the remaining boxes of old papers, searching for anything I might have overlooked, anything connected to Thomas that might shed light on his actions after he left. Most of it was just remnants of our shared life before the split, bills, old tax returns, things irrelevant to the years after. Then, tucked away in the very bottom of a box marked miscellaneous, beneath moth-eaten baby blankets and Michael's first T-ball trophy, I found it. A smaller, sealed cardboard file box. It was heavier than it looked. I did not recognize it immediately. It was not mine. The handwriting on the faded label was Thomas's, though I could not quite make out the word he had scribbled there. Curiosity mingled with a sense of unease as I carefully cut the brittle packing tape sealing it shut. He must have left it behind in his haste to leave all those years ago, and I had simply packed it away with everything else without looking inside, too overwhelmed at the time to sort through his debris. My heart pounded as I lifted the lid. Inside, stacked neatly, were letters, not my carbon copies. These were originals, my letters, addressed to Megan and Michael in my own handwriting, bearing postmarks from years ago. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. My breath hitched. They were unopened, sealed, never delivered. My hands trembled as I lifted one out. It was a birthday letter to Megan for her 10th birthday. The envelope slightly crumpled, her name written carefully on the front. Why was it here? Why had it not reached her? Beneath the stacks of my unopened letters, I found something else. Bank statements. Not mine. Thomas's bank statements from the years immediately after he left. And tucked within them, several deposit slips. My eyes scanned the faded ink. The amounts matched the withdrawals from my own account. The exact amounts I had sent via check or money order, earmarked for the children. But the deposit slips showed the funds going directly into Thomas's personal account, not into any separate account for the children, and certainly not reflected in any corresponding expenditures for them that I could see on the statements. He had kept the money, all of it. And then, the final, devastating blow. At the very bottom of the box lay a thick, bound journal. Thomas's journal. My hands shook so violently I could barely open it. I knew I should not read it, that it was a violation of privacy, however monstrous he had been. But the need to understand, to finally know the full truth, was overwhelming. I flipped through the pages, recognizing his familiar script, until I found entries from the period after he left. His words were cold, calculating, filled with resentment towards me and a chilling justification for his actions. He wrote about intercepting my letters, deeming them whining and attempts to manipulate the children. He admitted, quite plainly, to keeping the money I sent, viewing it as owed back pay for the life he felt he had sacrificed by marrying me. He detailed his deliberate campaign to paint me as unstable and uncaring to Megan and Michael, ensuring they would choose him, ensuring they would see me as the villain. Reading his cold, methodical destruction of my relationship with our children, written in his own hand, was like being stabbed repeatedly. He had not just hidden my letters, he had curated them, perhaps even used parts of them against me, twisting my words of love and longing into evidence of my supposed instability. The air left my lungs. I sank to the floor, the file box beside me, the open journal in my lap, surrounded by the physical proof of his betrayal. It was worse, so much worse than I had imagined. This was not neglect, it was malice. It was a systematic, intentional erasure of a mother from her children's lives, fueled by bitterness and greed. The fury I felt was white-hot, eclipsing the pain for a moment. How dare he? How dare he steal my children's mother from them, steal their financial support, and then allow, even encourage, Megan to build her story, her success, on the foundation of his lies. Sitting there on the floor, surrounded by the tangible evidence of Thomas's calculated cruelty. My stolen letters, his incriminating bank statements, his own damning words in that journal. The initial white-hot fury began to cool, replaced by something else. A profound, aching sadness, yes, but also a strange, unexpected clarity. The final pieces of the puzzle had clicked into place, revealing a picture that was both horrifying and, in a twisted way, liberating. It was not my fault. Not really. My exhaustion, my struggles, my imperfections as a mother working under impossible circumstances, those were real. But they were not the primary reason for the chasm between Megan and me. The chasm had been dug, deliberately and maliciously, by Thomas. He had built the walls, brick by painstaking brick, using my love letters as mortar and my financial sacrifices as paving stones for his own selfish path. Knowing this, truly knowing it deep in my bones, felt like shedding a heavy cloak of guilt I had carried for far too long. The weight lifted was immense, but it did not bring immediate relief. Instead, it brought a new kind of pain, the pain of seeing the full scope of the injustice, the wasted years, the love lost not through neglect, but through sabotage. My heart broke for the little girl Megan had been, waiting for letters that never arrived, feeling unseen and unloved by a mother who was pouring every ounce of her being into reaching her. My heart broke for the young woman she was now, unknowingly echoing her father's narrative, achieving success based on a foundational misunderstanding of her own life story. What should I do now? Part of me, the wounded, angry part, wanted to expose Thomas, to shout the truth from the rooftops, to send copies of his journal pages to Megan's publisher, to reveal his lies to the world that was currently celebrating her story of overcoming an absent mother. I imagined the scandal, the public vindication, Thomas finally facing consequences for his cruelty. The fantasy was tempting, fueled by years of suppressed pain and injustice. But as I looked at the stacks of my own unopened letters, filled with love and longing, another feeling began to take hold. Vindication against Thomas felt hollow. Publicly shaming Megan, revealing that her best-selling memoir was based on a lie, albeit one she believed, felt incredibly cruel. It would devastate her, potentially destroy her career, and likely shatter any remaining hope of reconciliation between us. Was that what I truly wanted? To tear her down in order to build myself back up? No. That was Thomas's way, not mine. My goal was not revenge. My goal was connection. My goal was for Megan to know the truth, not as an accusation, but as an offering of understanding, of context, of the fierce, unwavering love that had persisted despite every obstacle Thomas had thrown in its path. I did not need the world to know. I needed her to know. My resolve solidified. I would not fight fire with fire. I would not engage in public battles or bitter recriminations. Instead, I would gather the evidence, my unopened letters, the bank statements, copies of key pages from Thomas's journal, enough to prove the deception without wallowing in his venom, and I would present it to Megan directly, privately, quietly, and I would write her one more letter. Not a letter filled with accusations against her father, nor justifications for my own actions, but a letter expressing my unconditional love, my pride in the woman she had become, despite the difficult hand she was dealt, and my deep sorrow for the misunderstanding that had separated us. A letter explaining the contents of the box I would send her, framing it not as an attack, but as a sharing of the missing pieces of her story, pieces I only recently uncovered myself. I would offer her the truth, gently, lovingly, and trust her heart to recognize it. A new kind of strength surged through me, different from the frantic energy of survival that had fueled me years ago. This was a quieter strength, born of clarity and purpose. I was no longer just a victim of Thomas's actions or Megan's misunderstanding. I was the keeper of the full story, the holder of the missing pieces. And I had the power to share them, not as weapons, but as bridges. Packing the original letters back into the file box alongside the financial records and the carefully selected journal copies felt like preparing a sacred offering. This box contained not just evidence, but decades of hidden love, thwarted connection, and painful truth. Sending it felt like a monumental gamble, perhaps the biggest one of my life. Would Megan open it? Would she read my accompanying letter with an open heart? Would the truth heal, or would it inflict a new kind of wound? I did not know, but I knew I had to try. I could not let Thomas's lies be the final word in our story. My love for Megan demanded I offer her the chance to know the truth, however painful, however late. The question now was, would she be willing to receive it? Preparing the package felt like preparing for surgery, precise, nerve-wracking, and profoundly hopeful, yet terrifyingly uncertain. I carefully arranged the stacks of unopened letters, the bank statements showing both my deposits and Thomas's corresponding entries into his personal account, the photocopied pages from his journal, ensuring the most damning and explanatory passages were clearly visible. Finally, I placed my own handwritten letter on top, the one I had poured my heart into, rewriting countless times until the words felt right. Loving, honest, non-accusatory, simply offering the contents as pieces of a puzzle she deserved to see. Sealing the large box felt incredibly final. This wasn't just paper and ink. It was decades of suppressed truth, a potential bridge, or a potential bomb. I addressed it to Megan's official address, listed on her author website, using registered mail with delivery confirmation. Handing it over to the postal clerk felt like letting go of a breath I had been holding for years. Now it was out of my hands. The waiting began, and it was excruciating. Every ring of the phone made my heart leap. Every email notification chime sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I checked the tracking number obsessively online, watching the package make its slow journey across the country. Delivered. The website confirmed it 3 days later. She had it, or at least someone at her address had signed for it. Silence. A day passed, then 2, then a week. Nothing. No email, no phone call, no angry message relayed through mutual acquaintances. Just silence. The silence felt different this time. It was not the numb, resigned silence of the past year. It was a taut, humming silence, vibrating with unspoken possibilities, both wonderful and dreadful. My mind became a battlefield of conflicting scenarios. Maybe she hadn't opened it yet, too busy with her book tour or writing commitments. Maybe she had opened it, glanced at the contents, and dismissed it as a desperate ploy, tossing it aside without reading my letter. Maybe she had read it all and was reeling from the shock, needing time to process the implications, that her father had lied, that her mother's story was vastly different, that her own successful narrative was built on a false premise. Or maybe, worst of all, she had read it and simply did not care, hardened by years of believing the worst of me, unwilling or unable to reconsider the past. The uncertainty gnawed at me. Doubts began to creep back in. Had I done the right thing? Was it too much? Too soon? Should I have tried a different approach? The lack of response felt like a rejection, reopening the wounds I thought were beginning to heal with the discovery of the truth. The brief sense of empowerment I'd felt after finding Thomas's box began to fray around the edges, replaced by a familiar vulnerability. I had laid my heart bare, offered the most painful truths of my life, and received only silence in return. Friends called, asking if I'd seen Megan's latest interview or read a new article about her book. Each mention was a small torture, reminding me of the public narrative that still stood unchallenged. I tried to act normal, deflected questions about whether Megan and I had reconciled, but the strain was immense. The isolation I'd felt before returned, but sharper this time, tinged with the agony of waiting for a verdict that might never come. Sleep offered little escape. My dreams filled with images of Megan reading my letter, her expression unreadable, or of Thomas laughing, his victory complete even after all these years. I started second-guessing my decision not to go public. Maybe that had been the mistake. Maybe a quiet offering was too easily ignored. Maybe the only way to make her listen, to make the world listen, was to shout it from the rooftops, to fight fire with fire as I had initially been tempted to do. The thought felt sour, leaving a bad taste in my mouth. But the silence from Megan's end fueled my darker impulses. What if she never acknowledged it? What if she simply absorbed the information and moved on, leaving me forever trapped in the role of the absent mother, both publicly and privately? The injustice felt suffocating. Weeks turned into a month. The silence from Megan stretched thin, becoming almost unbearable. Then, one morning, flicking through the local newspaper, I saw it. A large advertisement for the upcoming City Literary Festival. And there was Megan's face, smiling confidently from the page, listed as a keynote speaker. She would be talking about her memoir, about family, truth, and reconciliation. The irony was a physical blow. Here she was, preparing to speak publicly about reconciliation, while privately ignoring the most significant truth, the most profound possibility for reconciliation, sitting unopened or unacknowledged in a box I had sent her. Seeing her face, reading the description of her talk, plunged me into the darkest despair I had felt since first reading her book. It seemed the world had fully embraced her narrative, solidifying the image of me as the absent mother, while the actual truth lay dormant, ignored. My quiet, hopeful gesture had failed. The silence felt like a definitive answer, a confirmation of my irrelevance in her life, both past and present. Maybe Thomas had won after all. Maybe the damage he inflicted was too deep, the lies too ingrained for the truth to penetrate. I felt utterly alone, adrift in a sea of misunderstanding, holding a truth no one, not even my own daughter, seemed to want. Was this how it would end? Me, alone with my box of painful proof, while Megan continued to build her life on a story that erased my love and sacrifice? The unfairness felt like a lead weight on my chest. That night, sleep evaded me completely. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the apartment pressing in. The feeling of powerlessness was overwhelming. But as the first gray light of dawn filtered through the blinds, something shifted. It was not hope, exactly, but a spark of defiance. I had been passive for too long, passive in the face of Thomas's manipulations years ago, passive now in waiting for Megan's response. If she would not acknowledge the truth privately, perhaps she needed to be confronted with it, not necessarily publicly, but directly, unavoidably. The literary festival. She would be there, in my city. It felt like fate, a convergence I could not ignore. My mind started racing. What if I went? What if I attended her talk? What if I found a way to speak to her afterward, away from the crowds? Or what if I needed a contingency plan? What if a private conversation was impossible? An idea, bold and terrifying, began to form. During the Q&A session after her talk, speakers often take questions from the audience. What if I prepared something? Not an angry outburst, not an accusation hurled across a crowded room, but a statement, a carefully worded, heartfelt statement, framed as a question perhaps, that laid bare the core of the missing story, the existence of the letters, the reality of the struggle. The thought made my blood run cold, but it also filled me with a strange sense of purpose. It would be a tremendous risk, potentially humiliating for both of us, potentially destroying any chance of a private reconciliation. But it would force the issue. It would crack the silence. It would ensure the truth was at least acknowledged, witnessed. I spent the next few days writing. Not another letter, but a speech, or rather, notes for a potential statement or question. I laid out the timeline, the jobs, the financial contributions backed by the statements I now possessed, the existence of the hundreds of loving letters Thomas had hidden. I wrote about a mother's desperate fight to stay connected against impossible odds. I tried to strip out the bitterness, the anger, focusing instead on the love, the sacrifice, and the painful truth of the deception that had shaped Megan's understanding of her past. Writing it was cathartic, terrifying, empowering. It felt like arming myself for a battle I prayed I would not have to fight. Holding the finished pages in my hand, I felt a flicker of the quiet strength return. I would give Megan until the day of the festival. I would attend her talk, sit in the audience, and hope, desperately hope, for some sign, some acknowledgement, some private word. But if the silence persisted, if she continued to speak of the absent mother without knowing the full story, then I would be prepared to stand up, perhaps not for the world, but for the truth of my own life, for the love I refused to let be erased completely. Would speaking this truth, whether privately or publicly, finally make her understand? Or would it be the final, irreparable act that severed the bond between us forever? I did not know, and the weight of that uncertainty was almost unbearable. The day of the literary festival arrived, gray and heavy, mirroring the anxiety weighing on my heart. I had my ticket, my carefully prepared notes tucked into my purse like a secret weapon. I prayed I would not need to deploy. The silence from Megan had continued, absolute and unbroken. My hope for a private acknowledgement before the event had dwindled to almost nothing. I felt sick with dread, envisioning the potential confrontation, the public exposure, the irreparable damage it might cause. Yet, the alternative, letting the false narrative stand unchallenged, letting my truth remain buried, felt equally impossible now. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple, dignified outfit, wanting to look composed, not like a victim seeking pity or an agitator seeking conflict. Driving downtown, finding parking, walking towards the auditorium, every mundane action felt charged with significance, like steps towards an unavoidable destiny. Inside, the buzz of the literary crowd felt alien, their cheerful anticipation a stark contrast to my internal turmoil. I found a seat towards the back, needing the anonymity, the ability to observe without being easily seen. When Megan walked onto the stage, my breath caught. She looked radiant, poised, every inch the successful author. Seeing her up there, confident and celebrated, while I sat in the shadows nursing this painful secret, intensified the surreal disconnect. She began her talk, her voice clear and engaging, weaving anecdotes from her childhood, speaking about the themes in her memoir: resilience, finding your voice, the complexities of family. She spoke of her absent mother, not with harshness, but with a kind of therapeutic detachment, framing it as the defining challenge that shaped her. Each mention felt like a small pinprick to my heart, but I held myself still, clutching my purse, my notes like a lifeline. I scanned her face for any sign, any flicker that might indicate she had received the package, that she knew more than she was letting on. But her expression was open, earnest, seemingly congruent with the story she was telling. My heart sank. She did not know, or she had chosen to ignore it completely. The Q&A session loomed, feeling less like a possibility and more like an inevitability. Then, about halfway through her prepared remarks, something shifted. She paused, losing her place for a moment, her gaze sweeping the audience. Her eyes seemed to catch mine for a fleeting second. Did she recognize me? I couldn't be sure. She faltered, took a sip of water, and when she resumed speaking, her voice had a different quality. The polished confidence seemed to waver slightly, replaced by a subtle tremor of something else: uncertainty, emotion. She continued with her talk, but the smooth narrative seemed to stumble. She spoke about memory, about how we construct stories to make sense of our past, about the possibility of misinterpreting events, especially through the lens of childhood pain. It was not an outright retraction, not even close, but it was a deviation, a nuance that hadn't been there in her published work or previous interviews I had seen online. My heart began to pound, a tentative, fragile hope fluttering within me. Was this because of the package? Was she wrestling with the information, even as she stood on stage? As her talk drew to a close, she put down her notes. She looked directly out at the audience, her eyes seeming to search again. "Family stories," she said, her voice thick with unexpected emotion, "are rarely simple. We tell them from our perspective, based on what we knew, what we felt. But sometimes there are other perspectives, other truths, hidden from view." She paused, swallowing hard. Sometimes the people we thought were absent were actually present in ways we couldn't see. Tears welled in her eyes. Tears welled in mine. The carefully prepared notes in my purse suddenly felt irrelevant, heavy. She knew. Maybe she did not understand everything yet. Maybe she was still processing, but she knew the story was more complicated. The silence had not been indifference. It had been shock, confusion, the difficult internal work of reconciling a lifetime of belief with contradictory evidence. The moderator stepped forward to begin the Q&A, but Megan held up a hand gently. "Before we take questions," she said, her voice trembling slightly but clear, "there is someone here today, someone whose perspective, whose truth, I wasn't aware of until very recently. Someone I owe a profound apology to." Her eyes found mine in the audience, holding my gaze across the crowded room. There was no accusation in her look, only a raw mix of regret, dawning understanding, and love. In that moment, the world outside the connection between my eyes and hers faded away. The need for public statements, for questions, for confrontation evaporated. The truth was out, not in a dramatic exposé, but in a quiet, tearful acknowledgement between mother and daughter. The bridge, fragile but real, had been extended. The auditorium was hushed, the audience sensing the raw, personal moment unfolding. Tears streamed freely down my face as I watched my daughter, my Megan, stand vulnerable and courageous on that stage. When her gaze locked with mine, filled with such profound, tearful acknowledgement, it felt like years of misunderstanding and pain dissolved in an instant. I did not wait for the Q&A. Driven by an instinct older than words, I rose from my seat and walked down the aisle towards the stage, oblivious to the curious eyes of the audience. Megan met me at the steps, rushing down to embrace me in a hug that felt like coming home after a long, harrowing journey. We clung to each other, sobbing openly. Decades of lost connection, hidden love, and painful truths flowing between us in that silent embrace. "Mom!" she choked out, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "Mom, I am so sorry. I never knew." "I know, baby, I know," I whispered back, stroking her hair, my own voice thick with tears. "It is okay. It is okay now." The event organizers kindly ushered us to a quiet room backstage, away from the bewildered audience. There, amidst stacks of unsold books and cups of lukewarm coffee, we began to truly talk for the first time in years, maybe ever, with the full truth finally laid bare between us. Megan confessed she had received the box nearly a month prior, but had been too afraid, too overwhelmed, to open it immediately. When she finally did, reading my letter first, then slowly, painfully working her way through the unopened letters from her childhood, the financial records, and the chilling excerpts from her father's journal, her entire understanding of her past had shattered. She described the shock, the confusion, the anger at her father, and the dawning, devastating realization of the injustice done to me and to her own childhood perception. She had needed time to process, to grieve the story she thought she knew before she could face me. Seeing me in the audience had been the catalyst, forcing the raw emotion to the surface. The days and weeks that followed were filled with more tears, more conversations, more healing. Megan pored over every letter, every document in the box, asking questions, filling in the gaps, finally seeing the relentless exhaustion, the constant worry, and the unwavering love that underpinned my years of absence. We talked about Thomas, not with bitterness, but with a shared sadness for his actions and the damage they caused. We acknowledged the pain her memoir had caused me and the pain her childhood perception, fueled by his lies, had caused her. There were no easy answers, no magic erasures of the past, but there was understanding. There was compassion. There was the slow, tentative rebuilding of trust on a foundation of truth. Inspired by this tumultuous journey of discovery and reconciliation, Megan found a new purpose for her writing. She decided, with my full blessing, to write another book. Not a retraction of her first memoir, because those feelings, that childhood perspective, were valid in their own right based on what she knew then. But a new book. A book about the complexities of memory, the fallibility of narrative, the discovery of hidden truths, and the enduring power of a mother's love against all odds. A book that would explore the danger of hearing only one side of the story and celebrate the messy, complicated, but ultimately resilient nature of family bonds. She asked me to share more memories, more details of those difficult years, wanting to honor my struggle, my sacrifice, truthfully this time. Our lives are not simple stories with neat beginnings and endings. They are complex tapestries woven with joy and sorrow, understanding and misunderstanding, truth and deception. We are not just the stories others tell about us, or even the stories we tell ourselves. We are the sum of our experiences, our intentions, our resilience, and the love we manage to hold on to, even through the darkest times. Finding the truth did not erase the pain of the past, but it allowed us to finally understand it, and in understanding, to begin healing together. Thank you for listening to my story, for walking this difficult path with me. If you have ever felt misunderstood, or if you have found reconciliation in unexpected ways, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Every story holds value, and every voice deserves to be heard. Please give this video a like if it touched you, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you do not miss the next chapter. Your support means the world. Take care, and remember to seek the whole story.